song written by Andrew Gold. Thank you for being a friend from the Canberra Choir on ABC Radio Canberra. We're just about to come up to the 6:30 news. We've got science coming up for you. Also, song quiz. What's the song? Here's the shortest of clues. Did you get it? Okay, it's a very well-known beginning to an excellent tune. Know what it is? 0 news time.
ABC News with Julian Abbott. Officials in Poland say they are struggling to cope with the 1.7 million Ukrainian refugees who so far fled the war. The BBC's Mark Lowen.
Poland has borne the brunt of what's already the largest refugee movement since the Second World War. And while the welcome here has been warm, it is showing signs of strain. In one small border town we visited, officials told us they feared new arrivals could soon be sleeping on the streets, with resources in shelters running low. Many of the new arrivals say they hope to return home soon, but with no sign of the war ending, Poland is planning how to shelter and integrate them here long term.
The United States says the attack on a Ukrainian military base near the Polish border will not impact military aid reaching Ukraine. North America correspondent Barbara Miller.
A senior defense official said it would be wrong to conclude that by hitting the Yavoriv base, Russia had dealt a blow to the US's ability to get military aid into Ukraine. Speaking on condition of anonymity, the official said the attack would not impact the transportation of equipment. The administration says the strike on the base was launched from Russian and not Ukrainian airspace. At least 35 people are believed to have died in the attack, with dozens more injured. Barbara Miller, ABC News, Washington.
Facebook's parent company Meta will have dedicated staff monitoring violent and abusive threats hurled at the nation's politicians on its platforms during the election campaign. Political reporter Matthew Doran.
Fears about the safety of elected representatives continue to linger, particularly amid the increase in violent rhetoric at protests against COVID-19 pandemic measures. That issue prompted a review of parliamentarian security protocols by the Australian Federal Police. Meta, which runs Facebook and Instagram, is promising it will have in-house staff monitoring commentary and discourse about the 2022 campaign, including threatening behaviour. The team will also monitor misinformation spread on its platforms, but warned it wouldn't intervene in legitimate political debate between candidates and parties.
One person has died and 5 people have been taken to hospital after a fire broke out at a boarding house at Newtown in Sydney's inner west. It's unknown how many people were inside when the fire started around 1 this morning. A new report shows cannabis use hit record highs in the ACT last year. Emma Thompson reports.
The latest wastewater monitoring report by the Australian Criminal Intelligence Commission found over 40,000 milligrams of cannabis per 1,000 people was being consumed every day in October last year alone. That's up from just over 20,000 in 2020. However, MDMA levels were down by over 50%, with 17.8 kilograms detected compared to 38.6 the year before. And the rates of methamphetamine and cocaine use have also decreased.
5 popular Australian filmmakers will now have their faces on new postage stamps. Directors Baz Luhrmann, George Miller, Gillian Armstrong, Peter Weir and Warwick Thornton will each have their portrait featured on stamps starting today. The police in Chicago say a 3-year-old boy has shot and killed his mother in the family car outside a supermarket. They say the toddler somehow found the gun and fired it. The police have not laid any charges, but the boy's father has been detained after indicating he owned the gun. In finance this morning, the Dow Jones is currently trading 38 points up at 32,982. The dollar's currently buying 71.97 US cents. To golf in the final round of the Players' Championship at Sawgrass in Florida, Australian Cameron Smith at 9 under has a share of the lead with Englishman Paul Casey. That's midway through the final round. Australia will take a 489-run lead into this afternoon's 4th day of the second test in Karachi. Marnus Labuschagne is 37 and Usman Khawaja 35, while David Warner wins for 7. They'll resume on 1 for 81 in their second innings after dismissing the host for 148, with Mitchell Starc claiming 3 wickets.
I think the way our batters by themselves the first 2 days, full credit to them to set a massive total and put us in the box seat.
At the tennis at Indian Wells this morning, Australian Daria Saville is on court against Elise Mertens. Saville won the first set 6-3 and the second Merton leads by 3 games to 1. This afternoon, Canberra's Nick Kyrgios faces Casper Ruud in the third round. The Raiders will name their side this afternoon for Saturday's Cowboys game with at least 2 changes to the starting side. A halfback Brad Schneider has COVID, while Tom Starling will start at hooker for the injured Josh Hodgson. A fine today, easterly winds and 23, fine and 24 tomorrow. Thursday, fine and 26. Friday should be mainly fine, a high around 28. 14 at the airport, it's 15 in the valley here in Dixon. It's a rather balmy 16 degrees. It feels like 14. ABC News and the time is 25 to 7.
Heard that the extreme rains have affected our potato industry. We've heard it's affected our dairy industry. What about our wine industry? What's happened to the wine harvest because of these extreme rains? That's all coming your way here on ABC Illawarra in the next half an hour. Right now, news time. We're having a bit of an issue with the news. We'll come to the news in just a moment and bring you all the latest from the ABC Illawarra newsroom. You are listening to ABC Illawarra.
Miss an interview on your favourite show? Head to the ABC Illawarra website to listen back to your favourite ABC Illawarra shows.
Visit abc.net.au/Illawarra today. All right, we'll have ABC Illawarra news for you in just a moment, and then all of that stuff to come, including, as I mentioned, our wine industry and how they're faring. Some varieties of our local wine are doing better than others, but really it's places like the Hunter that have escaped. So if you enjoy a Hunter Red, that's probably one of the only deep reds you'll get out of this year's harvest because of the rains that have affected wine growing regions across the state. We're a little bit late with the news, but right now it's ABC Illawarra News Time.
ABC Illawarra News. Good morning, I'm Nick McLaren. $55 million in federal funding will be handed to steel manufacturer BlueScope to support its advanced steel manufacturing precinct in Wollongong. The precinct will include a facility that will be able to produce steel for defence vehicles and boats. The federal government says the funding will help BlueScope manufacture more products locally so there is less reliance on overseas imports. The Planning Department has defended its decision to make Wallandilly Council staff sign a non-disclosure agreement during negotiations about plans for 18,000 new homes at Appin. Wallandilly Mayor Matt Gould says the secrecy clause means council staff are not able to tell elected councillors what's happening with the proposal. The Deputy Secretary of Planning and Environment, Tim Raymond, told a budget estimates hearing the non-disclosure agreement is designed to protect the unauthorised or premature publication of information about the project.
It's really important to note that signing that confidentiality agreement does not prevent TAP members from discussing the TAP program, such as its objectives, its progress, the next steps. But what it does do is ensure a free exchange of information and exploration of options to resolve local and state planning issues.
A man has been charged with high-range drink driving following a pursuit near Bomaderry on the weekend. A 38-year-old man was arrested on Sunday after failing to stop his car for police and travelling more than 50 kilometres an hour over the speed limit. He returned a positive breath test of .167 and was charged with a range of driving offences. He was granted conditional bail and will appear in Nowra local court next month. Illawarra emergency housing providers have received funding to build additional crisis accommodation for women fleeing domestic violence in the Illawarra. Wollongong Emergency Family Housing has secured state government funds to build 15 apartments in Unanderra by the end of 2023. CEO Mandy Booker welcomed the funding but admitted it does little to shorten the 10-year wait list for people seeking social housing.
Look, I think this is a really good start, but we know that there's a shortfall across the entire state as well as our local area for long-term housing for people that are escaping not only domestic violence but also are really vulnerable members of our community.
Meanwhile, the Women's Health Network is calling on the state government to increase funding for all of its centres to $1 million a year. It's made the argument in its pre-budget submission for the 21 centres across Sydney and regional New South Wales. General Manager of the Illawarra Women's Health Centre, Sally Stevenson, says the centres were originally funded in the 1980s and there's not been an adequate improvement in the base support in 3 decades.
So, for example, we were funded around $360,000 when we were established. The equivalent of that would be $1 million in today's cost. And at the moment, our core funding is only $550,000, which means it's desperately inadequate and really hard to meet demand on our services at the moment.
Schools impacted by Kangaroo Valley road closures are considering alternative ways to access their campuses. Chevalier College has 20 students who are cut off due to storm-damaged roads, and their families met over Zoom last night to discuss how to get students to their classes. The member for Kiama, Gareth Ward, is proposing that they take 2 buses to school and walk over the damaged parts of Mossvale Road to get to the other side.
If you walk on the road as I have done today, and you've inspected it as I have done, I can't see how this wouldn't be a good solution. In fact, it's probably the best solution. It means that kids can get off the bus at one point, walk safely to their second bus, and continue their journey.
Transport for New South Wales says it's still working on a long-term solution to fix damage to the northbound lanes at the Kiama Bends due to landslip. A spokesperson says Transport for New South Wales continues to monitor the condition of 2 landslip sites as continued wet weather and groundwater prolonged the closure. An initial clean-up has taken place and traffic management put in place, but further teams, including geotechnical specialists, won't inspect the site until it dries to determine potential measures to ensure 2-lane access is continued. Also making news this morning, the Rail, Tram and Bus Union is calling on the New South Wales Government to make train trips free every Friday until June to reimburse commuters for the snap shutdown last month. More on that story in our next bulletin at 7. Now it's back to Mel.
Thanks very much, Nick. And look, we're having a bit of trouble getting onto the Bureau as well. Again, this morning we'll have to sort out this issue. But let's take a look at the forecast, shall we? As I mentioned earlier, it looks like we're going to experience a medium to high chance of showers every day this week, some days wetter than others. And so it's expected to fall, this system that's bringing showers and thunderstorms to inland New South Wales, it is expected to weaken a little midweek and then move further east later in the week. So that's when we'll experience more showers, it would seem. So today, 60% chance of showers. They'll become less likely this afternoon and this evening. 20 the top for Bowral, 24 in Nowra, Wollongong and Ulladulla 23, Braidwood 19, Goulburn 21. Tomorrow, high chance of showers, most likely the afternoon and early evening. Thursday, easing off a little, 60% chance of showers and low to mid-20s again, and warming up a bit on Friday. High chance of showers, most likely in the afternoon and evening, and the chance of a thunderstorm inland on Friday afternoon and evening, but mid to high 20s for Friday. On the coastal waters today, pretty benign conditions. East to southeasterly winds at 10 to 15 knots. They might pick up a little, 20 knots offshore north of Port Kembla late this morning. Seas around 1 metre and an easterly swell of 1 to 1.5 metres. And as I mentioned, for some, it's a reasonably warm start to the day. For others, it's pretty average. So 17 for Albion Park, Bellambi 21 already, High Range 12.5, Jervis Bay 17, Kiama 21, Mossvale 13, Nowra 15.5, Point Perpendicular 20, Port Kembla Harbour 22, Ulladulla 18, Braidwood 12 and Goulburn at the airport about 13 degrees. Traffic. Just checking on the traffic, nothing much to really report. It looks like some traffic's building up around sort of Preston's and Kajula kind of area if you're headed up the M7 today, but nothing I can really see that's causing some of that congestion. But otherwise, things looking pretty A-OK, apart from what we know will be the problems that will persist for some time, which is Mossvale Road between Camberwara and Fitzroy Falls. Parts of the Illawarra Highway, there's also still a contraflow in place on Macquarie Pass, as far as I understand and can see, and one northbound lane at Kiama Bends will remain closed for some time as well. We've heard that it's a little too sodden to do the required work there. Did you get caught up in the traffic snarls on the weekend? I saw the queues. Is this what we're going to encounter every weekend on a Sunday as people head back to Sydney from the south coast along the Kiama Bends? I heard of people stuck in traffic for a long, long time, and that was purely, it would seem, due to the one northbound lane closed northbound on the Kiama Bends.
The results back, get another 20 or 30 mil of rain, and those samples are null and void. Up for another round of sampling, which is, close to the vicinity of $1,000.
Do you think you will lose the oysters that you've currently got in there? Do you know the chance of survival for them?
That's a bit of a guessing game at the moment, depending on when we actually get salt back. Good quality salt water back out of the oysters. We're looking definitely at a 50 to 60% kill rate. I know some of the babies from other farmers, they're up over 80% already.
Nambucca River oyster grower James Ford there speaking with our rural reporter, Keely Johnson. It's 7:30 news time.
Partly cloudy day with the high chance of showers, most likely this afternoon and into the evening. Good morning, Nick Parmenter with ABC Mid-North and Coast Coast News. A witness has told the New South Wales Bushfires Coronial Inquiry the Karai East fire west of Kempsey was the worst thing he's ever experienced in his life. Jessica Clifford reports.
The Karai East fire began when lightning struck remote bushland in the Oxley Wild Rivers National Park in early November 2019. On November 8 at around 3 p.m, David Duff could see some puffs of smoke in the distance towards Kempsey. By 4 p.m, he told the inquiry there were thunderclaps. It was raining fire and he was putting out spot fires in his bedroom. By that night, he had lost his home. The fire went on to kill one person and destroy 90 other properties. The inquiry will today open an inquest into the death of Barry Parsons, who died near his Willawarren home as he tried to escape the flames.
A hospital on the mid-north coast is set to save more than $80,000 a year with a first-of-its-kind large-scale battery storage project. The Port Macquarie Base Hospital already has a rooftop solar panel system. This latest project is expected to reduce emissions by more than 3,000 tonnes of CO2. Parliamentary Secretary to the Treasurer, Felicity Wilson, says the battery backup storage will ensure greater security and reliability in the system.
We need to make sure we have these types of significant battery storage projects in place to make sure that we can go greener with our energy and reduce our costs and our reliance on some of the traditional diesel generation backup systems or the electricity grid, which we know is getting increasing pressure over time.
One mid-north coast school says it's experiencing a spike in COVID cases as some independent schools across the state consider reintroducing restrictions. The Association of Independent Schools in New South Wales says at this stage there isn't a general policy to reintroduce restrictions, with each school making its own decisions. St Columba Anglican School in Port Macquarie says while it has no plans to reintroduce restrictions like mask wearing, it has seen a spike in cases. Principal Terry Muldoon says the increase in cases follows the reintroduction of camps.
We knew we would get a spike when we sent the camps away. We knew we'd get a spike when we were allowed to send excursions and have greater gatherings. But so far, thankfully, none of the people who have tested positive in this tranche have been seriously affected by the virus so far.
Detectives are seeking information about the death of a man near Grafton more than 4 years ago. Louisa Rubo reports.
35-year-old Scott Payne was last seen at Cootes Crossing on November 29, 2017. His personal belongings and burned-out four-wheel drive were found 2 days later, more than 60 kilometres away at Dalmorton. Mr Payne's body was also found at Dalmorton 2 weeks after his disappearance. Grafton Police are preparing a brief for the coroner ahead of a proposed coronial inquest into his death. Detectives have asked anyone with information about Mr Payne's death to contact Grafton Police.
Close to a year since floods devastated the mid-north and Coast Coast, some families are yet to get back on their feet. Jess Nicol and her family of 5 lost their rental property near Kempsey and have been from place to place ever since, including at a nearby camping ground where they shared two tents. Last month, they were forced to evacuate during the latest period of wet weather. Miss Nichols says the wait for housing support could be up to 2 years.
With all the other floods we've just had, I reckon that will just put a back burner on it anyway, because there's going to be other people now who are homeless, who were already in the situation as well. That was us. We were already in this situation. And then it hit us again.
In news elsewhere, a convoy of civilians has escaped from the besieged Ukrainian city of Mariupol after 10 days. Local officials say as many as 2,500 residents of the city have died so far in heavy bombings. Facebook's parent company Meta is promising to monitor threatening and violent abuse hurled at politicians during the upcoming federal election. Agencies such as the Australian Federal Police have noted a sharp increase in harassment and abusive behaviour directed at the nation's elected representatives, particularly as protests railing against pandemic restrictions reached fever pitch late last year. To the weather, partly cloudy with a high chance of showers. Coffs Harbour and Kempsey both reaching 26, Port Macquarie, Taree and Foster 25. To hear today's local news, search online for ABC Local and look for your local station.
From the US. So mask wearing is a definite must in crowded indoor environments. Outdoor environments, much safer. Obviously anybody with any symptoms needs to get a PCR test if there's PCR testing available, or a RAT, just to make sure that they're not spreading COVID around. And you know, some people will say, look, I'm at high risk, I've got underlying illnesses, or I'm in the older age group, I'm not taking my chances, I'm going to avoid it. And those are all sensible things. I think that we'll see as autumn and winter comes along, we've got pretty sensible people out there. People don't want to take the risk of long COVID. They'll hopefully get themselves that third dose and hopefully wear a mask where they can't distance from other folk.
I know that it's more of a government decision and things like that, but from your point of view, do you think that restrictions like masks will come back for these sub-variants?
Oh, look, I think it's that infectious and there's so many questions over long COVID that sensible people will wear masks. They don't need government dictates to tell them to wear masks, but where you can't distance from folk who may be infectious, why would you take the chance with one of these with long COVID? So I think mask wearing as we head into the winter months will become much more commonplace again. Now that it's amazing, when we look over the last 2 years, probably one of the great things other than the development of these mRNA vaccines is a much stronger evidence base for the effectiveness of masks. So I do think people will use it of their own accord with or without government mandating it.
Dr. David Durheim, Public Health Physician at Hunter New England Health, thanks so much for your time.
My great pleasure. It's
29 to 8 on ABC New England Northwest. Kemi Maguire keeping you company this Tuesday morning. It's news time.
From Tamworth to Tingha, from Boggabri to Manila.
Love where you live.
This is ABC New England Northwest.
Good morning, Lani Odaway with ABC New England Northwest local news. An inquiry into the Karai East fire, which began near Armidale in 2019, has heard it was not a fire front but a firestorm, raining flames around homes. Jessica Clifford reports.
David Duff told the New South Wales Bushfires Coronial Inquiry the Karai East fire was one of the worst things he's ever experienced in his life. Mr Duff told the inquiry he watched the fire approach his home 10 kilometres west of Kempsey and said it was a thunderstorm which was raining flames. His home was destroyed. It went on to kill one person and destroy 90 homes, along with 250 outbuildings. Expert witnesses said the fire started after a lightning strike in the Oxley Wild Rivers National Park in November 2019, but was initially inaccessible for firefighting. The inquiry continues today.
The federal court is expected to rule on a long-running case between the federal environment minister and a group of teenagers over a proposed coal mine. Patrick Bell has more.
The teenagers took Minister Susan Lee to court in 2020 in a bid to stop her approving the extension of the Vickery coal mine near Gunnedah. The court found the minister had a duty to consider the potential harm to young people from climate change when approving fossil fuel projects. Environmental lawyers described that decision as a world first. The minister then appealed the court's finding before signing off on the project in September last year. The full bench of the federal court is expected to rule on the appeal today.
The former Mayor of Glen Innes, Carol Sparks, will run for the Greens in the seat of New England at the federal election. Ms Sparks will be up against Deputy Prime Minister Barnaby Joyce for the seat. You can hear Kemi Maguire interview Ms Sparks at 8:40. Organisers say an Australian campaign to provide diabetic supplies to Ukrainian refugees is becoming more important as the conflict continues. Collections of supplies such as glucose strips and insulin pens are underway in several locations across the country, including Tamworth. Medical journal The Lancet has warned there could be long-term consequences if diabetic refugees can't properly manage their condition. Diabetes educator Belinda Moore says there's a high level of stress for refugees with the disease.
They're trying to walk hundreds and hundreds of kilometres with no food, and that hundreds and hundreds of kilometres is going to also induce hypoglycemia, which is running low. It's just a catastrophic thought.
The Hunter New England Local Health District says it's been consulting with a range of stakeholders to develop a master plan for the new Moree Hospital. The Moree Plains Shire Council has called for more consultation with locals over what the $80 million hospital will include. In a statement, a spokesperson for the district says there will be further community consultation in the coming months, but it says it won't publicly release the clinical services plan as it's written for internal decisions and has industry language. Northern wheat growers are being urged to prepare for a potentially serious outbreak of a fungal disease. Surveys by the Grains Research and Development Corporation conducted throughout New South Wales and southern Queensland have found moderate to high levels of Fusarium crown rot. Agronomist Rob Long says growers need test soils and plan where to plant crops, as the disease causes significant yield losses.
Well, the best thing they can do for themselves is know what level of risk they've got in their paddocks. And it's a matter of being able to prioritise the dirtiest to the cleanest paddocks that a grower has and then be able to make the decision.
A $2 million pipeline to improve Coonabarabran's water security has been completed. Madeline Austin has more.
The 8.2-kilometre pipe, which runs parallel to the existing main for Timor Dam, links 3 bores to the town's water treatment plant. The bores were drilled to create an emergency supply of potable water to Coonabarabran and was funded by the state government's drought stimulus package. In 2018, the town faced a major water shortage when the Timor Dam dropped to 18% capacity.
Turning to the weather now, moderate flooding continues along the Barwon River at Mungandai. The flood peak is now travelling to Mogul Magill. A mostly sunny day for the northwest and a little cloud cover for the northern tablelands. Top temperatures in Inverell of 28 degrees, Glen Innes 22, Armidale 21 degrees, Tamworth 29, Narrabri 31 and Moree heading for a top of 32. For more local news, search for ABC New England Northwest.
Principals of each school, so we're getting them up there when they need it, where they need it, ready for the kids, just so we're not inundating them with things that they're not ready for. So they're all ready next week to get back, and they really need these items for the kids.
Yeah, and they need to get back to school and get a bit of routine as well. Catherine, what a great initiative. Thank you for telling us about it.
Thank you so much for giving us the time. We really appreciate it.
A pleasure. Catherine Woodbine there, organiser of the Backpack Venture. So head to Facebook for more information about where to go.
Yeah, I'd recommend that because they have drop-off points from Rutherford to Tanilba Bay to Cessnock, Raymond Terrace, Fassy Fern. So check online for that big list of places you can drop off those school supplies.
The new Sydney Football Stadium is set to open this year, meaning the Knights probably won't play at the SCG again. Some fans are very happy about that. Why? You'll hear next after the 6:30 news.
Hi, I'm Richard Feidler. Tune in to Conversations weekday mornings from 11 here on ABC Radio, or choose from thousands of shockingly thought-provoking conversations anytime on the ABC Listen app or wherever you get your podcasts.
Good morning, I'm Madeline Lewis with the ABC News. Ukrainian authorities are reporting another day of heavy Russian shelling of several cities. At least 4 people have died in strikes in outlying suburbs of the capital, Kyiv. 9 have been killed in a Russian attack on a television tower in the country's north. A 4th round of talks between Ukraine and Russia, planned for today, has been delayed for 24 hours. In a video address, Ukraine President Volodymyr Zelensky urged his people to keep fighting.
It's the 19th day of our resistance. Ukrainian armed forces are standing strong with courage. We're inflicting such losses on the enemy that he doesn't know where to find reserves, where to find help for themselves, for the occupier. It's pathetic, but we have no right to relax.
New petrol data shows sharp increases in fuel prices in the Hunter even before Russia advanced into Ukraine. Giselle Wakatama reports.
The corporate regulator, the ACCC, monitors petrol prices and has released its latest report. It says petrol prices across Australia's major cities soared to 8-year highs last month as a result of supply and demand impacts as the Russia and Ukraine conflict ramped up. Prices in the Hunter are as high as $2.35 a litre, but even before the conflict, the Commission said prices were on the rise, driven by international oil price hikes. In the Hunter, those rises are reflected in the ACCC's petrol monitoring data for the December quarter. In the 3 months, prices rose by 24% in Singleton, 18% in Muswellbrook, 13% in Bulahdelah and 6% in Newcastle.
New South Wales health authorities are warning there could be more cases of Japanese encephalitis after a 6th case was confirmed in the state yesterday. Most people won't experience any symptoms from the mosquito-borne disease, but in more serious cases it can cause severe neurological illness. Richard Broome from New South Wales Health says there are practical steps to reduce the risk of mosquito bites.
Avoid being out at dusk and dawn when mosquitoes are most likely to be active, and if you are out and about, wearing long-sleeved, light-coloured clothing and making sure that you cover your skin with an effective mosquito repellent. So those are repellents that contain DEET, picaridin or oil of lemon eucalyptus.
The Regional Health Minister will attend a public meeting in Bulahdelah tonight to speak with the community about the closure of its only nursing home. Blake Doyle reports.
The Minister and Federal Member for Lyne, David Gillespie, said he was shocked and disappointed to hear Anglican Care is closing its nursing home at Bulahdelah. The nearest homes are in Tea Gardens, Foster or Taree. It's also closing its home at Mount Hutton due to the impact of the pandemic on its ability to recruit and retain staff. Dr Gillespie is meeting with the Anglican Bishop of Newcastle to discuss the decision and is due to attend a public meeting at the Bulahdelah School of Arts Hall tonight to update residents. He said he's raised the issue with the Minister for Aged Care Services, Senator Richard Colbeck, so he can alert his department as well.
State gaming officials have told Budget Estimates the implementation of a gambling minimisation trial at a Newcastle club has been delayed. West's New Lambton partnered with poker machine giant Aristocrat in May last year with the hope of starting the cashless gaming trial using a digital wallet by September. But 6 months on, the trial is yet to go live. Officials told Budget Estimates that staff are still working to ensure it's appropriate for the trial to commence. A survey of school leaders has found burnout among principals is at a record high, with almost 30% at risk of self-harm. Here's National Education and Parenting reporter Connor Duffy.
The long-running Australian Catholic University longitudinal study found 4 out of 10 principals experienced physical violence and more than 40% were threatened with it. It found 29% of principals surveyed are at risk of mental health problems or self-harm. ACU's Dr Paul Kidson says despite the challenges, principals are continuing to go above and beyond.
Principals show enormous resilience, commitment and dedication.
The report's authors want policy changes to ease the burden on school leaders.
Briefly, in cricket, Australia holds a 489-run lead after 3 days of the second test against Pakistan in Karachi. Checking the weather now, partly cloudy in the Hunter today, high chance of showers along the coast. Newcastle and Maitland heading for a top of 26 degrees, Singleton and Scone expecting a top of 27. ABC News.
Breakfast with Dan and Jenny on ABC Newcastle.
ABC Newcastle.
morning. Do footballers care where they play? I mean, you want to play in front of your home team, right? You want to play in front of your home crowd. The home ground advantage is definitely a thing, but do they care about the actual venue?
Yeah, does it make much of a difference if there's a vocal crowd there? Is it all the same?
Or if it's designed as a cricket ground, do NRL...
in a dangerous goods environment and make sure that everything else is working. But it's a significant process you've got to go through. And it just depends upon the integrity of the tanks prior to the flood. Like all things, service stations age over time, so there can be some issues with seals and so on, which means that service stations are absolutely obligated to ensure that they run proper checks on both the tank and pump system as well as the fuel. If they've got contaminated fuel, they need to evacuate the tanks and then seek a new delivery of fuel before serving customers.
The news is upon us, but in 30 seconds, Mark McKenzie, how old or how long can you have tanks for before they need to be replaced?
That's an open question. It depends what type of tank you've got. Generally, tanks can sit in the ground for 25 to 30 years without too many problems. They need occasional maintenance, obviously. It's a case of making sure you keep water out of the tanks so they don't rust. But a lot of the fiberglass tanks we've got these days can last well in excess of that.
Mark McKenzie from the Australasian Convenience and Petroleum Marketers Association. Thank you.
Yeah. Pleasure, Joe.
7:30, news time.
Good morning, I'm Donna Harper with ABC North Coast News. The Lismore City Council has put a $500 million cost on the damage bill from the recent floods. Bronwyn Herbert reports.
Preliminary assessments were carried out last week across council-owned assets, including roads, bridges and buildings. General Manager John Walker says the damage bill is huge.
It's a big number, so I'm pretty certain it's going to get between 400 and 500 million.
Council buildings, the airport, library, art gallery and sporting grounds are all significantly damaged, as well as sewage systems and water infrastructure.
Richmond Valley Council is expecting the full extent of loss and damage to its assets to exceed $150 million. General Manager Vaughan McDonald says it's likely the recovery process will take at least 3 years.
We already had a housing crisis. We already had supply constraints. It was already difficult to get trades and contractors in to get work done. This event on such a scale across this whole region is just going to compound that issue.
Meanwhile, councils hardest hit by the floods will receive $46 million in emergency funding that will be fast-tracked to kickstart urgent road repairs and restore access to communities. State Roads Minister Sam Farraway says flooding has caused millions of dollars of damage, including destroyed road surfaces, wrecked signage and landslips across roads. He says repairing roads is important in the recovery process.
It is absolutely vital, and I don't want local councils to feel totally overwhelmed with their own process, with their own local roads. My aim is to work as closely as I can with local government.
The federal member for Richmond says it's crucial the Prime Minister provides additional financial support to flood-affected residents in Tweed, Byron and Ballina Shires. Justine Elliott says it's disgraceful these areas have not yet had confirmation of additional disaster support payments. Residents in the Lismore, Clarence Valley and Richmond Valley LGAs have been able to access the extra payments since last week. Ms Elliott says help is urgently needed.
We've seen areas right across the North Coast devastated, particularly areas around Chindra, down to Murwillumbah, Mullumbimby, Ballina. People have lost their homes and lost their livelihoods. It really is disgusting that we have not been able to access those extra disaster payments.
All tiers of government and insurance companies are being asked to help struggling flood-damaged businesses recover from the disaster. The request has come from Business New South Wales as businesses assess their damage and consider their future options. Regional Manager Jane Laverty says a Northern Rivers business hub has been set up at Southern Cross University with office space and other free services. Ms Laverty says many businesses are nervous about rebuilding and insurance companies must step up and change some policies.
I guess they've shown a real concern about reinvesting in their business in a place where we could have another weather event next week. They're looking for some surety. It's very, very difficult for them when they are unable to get business insurance and property insurance.
Lismore Council says Boral will be responsible for the clean-up of a leaked asphalt product from its mothballed plant in South Lismore. After the floods, a sticky black residue was found inside homes on Engine Street and a nearby business that was believed to have leaked from the former asphalt plant. Council's General Manager John Walker says all the agencies are working together to address the pollution issue.
Ultimately, it's Boral's, and they will be held liable. They are working cooperatively with us, and the EPA will monitor it, but it is their issue that needs to be cleaned up by them.
In a statement, a Boral spokesperson said the company has engaged an external expert consultant to undertake a thorough assessment to determine appropriate clean-up processes. 8 COVID-19 cases have been confirmed amongst residents of an aged care home in Ballina. The Florence Price Gardens facility normally houses 120 residents, but has now taken on additional people from a flood-affected aged care facility in Lismore. RSL Life Care spokesman Graham Millett says despite the challenges, limiting the spread of disease is a priority.
Now, Florence Price Gardens has previously had COVID cases, and the team there have brought that outbreak under control, and we have confidence that they'll be able to do that again. But to limit infections, visitor restrictions have been imposed.
Lismore's CBD will be closed to the public today as Essential Energy undertakes significant electricity repair work. Traffic control will be in place to assist with traffic flow, and where possible the area should be avoided between 6 a.m. and 6 p.m. to reduce congestion. This is ABC Local News.
Next month, you'll hear a local response to that in the news with Kira Proust coming right up. And we're going to be joined by Christy McBain, the member for Eden-Monaro. Her thoughts on disaster response and what's been happening up north. Not impressed with what she's seen and whether lessons have been learned from our region. Your comments on that as well. This one from Tony, formerly from Perico. Tony says it appears that nothing tangible has changed. The same self-praise and talk is still being used from the Black Summer Fire script. Sitting listening to all the empty words, I'm back in our fire period feeling the helplessness for the people in the north. Tony, thanks very much for your text message. Coming up soon, you're going to hear from a medic from Lillipilly who is hoping to send first aid kits to people in Ukraine. More after the news. Right now it is 7:30, news time.
Good morning, Kira Proust with ABC Southeast News. A peak body for victims of domestic violence says the state government needs to have more tailored support for people who have escaped abuse. It comes after the New South Wales government announced 68 new homes will be built for women and children escaping domestic violence. However, none have been allocated for the Southeast. Interim CEO of Domestic Violence New South Wales, Elise Phillips, welcomed the announcement, but says there are big gaps that need to be addressed.
We also need government to invest $500 million to maintain the existing New South Wales social housing properties so that they are at the appropriate standard for people to be living.
The trial of a Cobargo man accused of child sex offences has heard closing statements ahead of a verdict in the Bega District Court. Alex Hargraves reports.
The 38-year-old man is facing trial charged with sex offences which allegedly took place between 2016 and 2020, involving two girls aged between 9 and 12 near Bermagui and Cobargo. Yesterday, the Crown argued in closing that the alleged victims were fair and balanced witnesses who provided specific and detailed accounts while describing the accused as combative, calling parts of his evidence implausible. Lawyers for the accused said contradictions and a lack of detail in the girls' evidence raised serious concerns about the credibility of the allegations. A verdict is expected to be delivered on Thursday.
The Eden Chamber anticipates cruise ships to return to the town later this year if the federal government formally lifts the ban on international routes mid-April. Federal Tourism Minister Dan Tehan says he's still waiting on the states to sign off on the plan to allow international cruise lines to return to Australia on April 17. If approved, Eden Chamber President Eric Wolski says it would still take months of planning to see the first cruise ships back on the far south coast.
I'd anticipate maybe September, October, which is about a 6-month lead in to get the ships back to ports here in Australia. And obviously they're going to have to be looking at staffing them up as well. So that does take time.
An employment service in the southeast is calling for businesses in the region to be more open-minded when looking for staff to fill vacant roles. Max Solutions currently has more than 3,500 people on their caseload across the Illawarra and far south coast region. Deputy State Manager Gary Haynes says there are plenty of people looking for work and is calling on businesses to consider applicants they wouldn't usually.
They may not have considered the benefit of taking on a mature age worker. That can not only provide that business with someone who is a committed, long-term local in the area, but also somebody who can bring those experiences, often from decades of working in a different industry, to that local business.
The president of Bega RSL says there will be modified Anzac Day marches in Bega, Tathra and Bamboka this year to reduce costs involved in holding the annual event. Changes to traffic management requirements across the state mean Anzac Day marches this year will need accredited traffic controllers or will need to be modified to minimise traffic disruption. Bega RSL sub-branch president Gary Berman says a compromise was needed as the cost of running a traditional march has become more expensive.
We've had to do traffic plans that are of a higher level to satisfy these requirements, but it has also meant then we have to have a whole lot more barriers and a whole lot more people manning them. So it will be different this year, but it's better than having no march at all.
And appointments are still available at the Breast Screen Mobile Clinic in Cooma for eligible women aged between 50 to 74. The clinic is in Cooma for the next 4 weeks, providing free mammograms to women who cannot easily access the next closest services in Bega, Moria or Queanbeyan. Breast Screen's Southern Region radiographer Bronwyn Morley says COVID safety measures are still in place.
So we are still asking women to pop masks on and asking screening questions, and are only asking women to attend their appointment if they are well and healthy. What we are finding is that women of the local communities are actually tending to want to have those appointments within their communities and wanting to travel less, which is why we're promoting this visit in Cooma.
And turning now to today's weather, it's looking partly cloudy across the southeast, a slight chance of a shower in the high country and a medium chance along the coast. Top of 24 expected in Bega, 23 in Batemans Bay, 21 in Cooma, and tops between 14 and 15 about the Alpine Ranges. And for more news on the stories we're following, you can of course go online and search ABC Southeast New South Wales. ABC News.
Thanks, Kira.
I'm a believer. That is the Monkeys taking us up to the 7:30 news on ABC Upper Hunter. More on the Dartbrook news after that. Good morning. I'm Madeline Lewis with ABC Hunter News. A company that wants to restart a mothballed Upper Hunter mine has welcomed a court decision allowing a 5-year extension, but it remains tight-lipped on the next steps. Amelia Bernasconi reports. The New South Wales Land and Environment Court has upheld Australian Pacific Coal's appeal against a 2019 planning decision that denied an extension to the Dartbrook coal mine's lifespan. The mine near Aberdeen has been non-operational since 2006, but can now restart using board and pillar methods until 2027. In 2019, the New South Wales Independent Planning Commission refused the 5-year extension, citing environmental concerns and saying it was not in the public interest. Australian Pacific Coal told the stock exchange it would provide more details on the project soon. The New South Wales Rail, Train and Bus Union is threatening industrial action if the state government doesn't offer commuters free trips. The union says the government should waive fares every Friday until the end of June to compensate for a network snap shutdown last month. Rail workers have been taking industrial action as negotiations with the government on an enterprise agreement stall. New petrol data shows sharp increases in fuel prices in the Hunter even before Russia advanced into Ukraine. Giselle Wakatama explains.
The corporate regulator, the ACCC, monitors petrol prices and has released its latest report. It says petrol prices across Australia's major cities soared to 8-year highs last month as a result of supply and demand impacts as the Russia and Ukraine conflict ramped up. Prices in the Hunter are as high as $2.35 a litre, but even before the conflict, the Commission said prices were on the rise, driven by international oil price hikes. In the Hunter, those rises are reflected in the ACCC's petrol monitoring data for the December quarter. In the 3 months, prices rose by 24% in Singleton, 18% in Muswellbrook, 13% in Bulahdelah and 6% in Newcastle.
Lake Macquarie will host a collection point for donated medical supplies that will be sent to Ukrainian refugees with diabetes. An estimated 20,000 people living with type 1 diabetes have fled Ukraine. The Australian diabetes community is gathering supplies such as glucose strips and insulin pens, with collection points set up at Belmont, Gosford and Tamworth. Diabetes educator and volunteer with the Type 1 Foundation, Belinda Moore, says many refugees won't have enough supplies to manage their condition.
They're worried about survival. They don't have time to pick up all of their little bits and pieces of diabetes supplies, and diabetes supplies are lots and lots and lots of little different pieces, which are probably under rubble by now. And so they've got a backpack on their back. That's it.
The Regional Health Minister will attend a public meeting in Bulahdelah tonight to speak with the community about the closure of its only nursing home. Blake Doyle reports.
The Minister and Federal Member for Lyne, David Gillespie, said he was shocked and disappointed to hear Anglican Care is closing its nursing home at Bulahdelah. The nearest homes are in Tea Gardens, Foster or Taree. It's also closing its home at Mount Hutton due to the impact of the pandemic on its ability to recruit and retain staff. Dr Gillespie is meeting with the Anglican Bishop of Newcastle to discuss the decision and is due to attend a public meeting at the Bulahdelah School of Arts Hall tonight to update residents. He said he's raised the issue with the Minister for Aged Care Services, Senator Richard Colbeck, so he can alert his department as well.
Big swells that carved out sand have forced the temporary closure of Samurai Beach and Warramai conservation lands north of Newcastle. State officials say the waves have created drop-offs of up to 4 metres, making it dangerous for beach driving. There's also a significant amount of debris that's washed ashore. The beach will remain closed to vehicles and camping until tomorrow. The Hunter New England Health District has recorded 902 new COVID cases in the latest reporting period. There are 26 people with the virus being cared for in hospital. 2 people are in intensive care. The New South Wales government is expecting a surge in cases in the next few weeks due to the spread of Omicron subvariant BA2. Checking the Hunter's weather now, partly cloudy today, high chance of showers along the coast. Newcastle and Maitland expecting a top of 26 degrees, Singleton and Scone heading for a top of 27. Tomorrow's expected to be partly cloudy, high chance of showers in the lower Hunter. For more local news, search ABC Newcastle News online.
Amelia Bernasconi on ABC Upper Hunter.
ABC Upper Hunter.
Hello, it is great to be with you on ABC Upper Hunter this Tuesday, the 15th of March. And some big news for our little region. We are learning more about this decision in the Land and Environment Court around the Dartbrook mine appeal. It's been upheld. That was from Australian Pacific Coal, who wanted an extension of their mining licence through to 2027. It was knocked back